Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I'm the actor.
And my name is Josh Knapp. I'm a broadcast engineer.
Everybody can see us now, so we have to I have to be kind of cool. But I had technical problems, so I'm trying to act cool, but I'm feeling like
Well, that's actually a good parallel to the main character of the movie that we're going to talk about today, Tar.
Good segue.
Yeah,
good
man.
segue.
We talked about maybe talking about things we've watched and other stuff before we get into it, but I think this movie it's a really just dense movie, and it's got a lot of stuff to say, and it's from a guy who hasn't actually made a movie in 16 years or something. So I mean, it's Todd Field. He wrote and directed this movie, and he's been busy since. I mean, we've actually talked about his previous movies. Actually, I have not seen In the Bedroom, but we both are, I think, pretty big fans of Little Children, and just him as an actor. He's done a couple of roles, a few roles in the 90s. He was in Eyes Wide Shut. He was the piano player in Eyes Wide Shut. So, I mean, he's been around. And then in the interim time between 2006 when Little Children came out and now, he's just been super busy doing projects, which I didn't even really know was a thing where you could get paid to not produce things. But I mean, sounds like a pretty sweet gig, I guess, just as long as you're not completely tied into the actual producing an actual product. There's a whole industry of getting, I guess, deals and writing scripts and then trying to get them sold, but still getting paid to write the scripts. I don't know. It seems like a mystery to me, because in my line of work, you either do the thing or you don't do the thing. But I guess, have you run across that or?
Oh yeah, there's a whole profession of people who read scripts, who rewrite scripts, who are brought in just to rewrite it, and they're under contract to see certain things and do certain things for certain projects, and people are attached to certain things. And when let's say the three screenwriters they determine they need a rewrite, it's usually going towards somebody they already have worked with, not necessarily the three screenwriters, but the studio, whoever produces the film. And then some scripts are written with people in mind. This one, I believe.
Yeah, I believe it was written with Cate Blanchett in mind. And it's funny because, the one big profile project that Todd Field did was he was adapting a Jonathan Franzen novel, Purity, and he was going to showrun and direct this show at Showtime, and they got all this stuff lined up. He had a bunch of script, he had 20 hours of TV written, and Daniel Craig was in the bag, and then they were just nope, it's not going to work. Showtime was we're good. We don't want to do it. And then Daniel Craig was well, I got to do a Bond movie. And then that was it. And so, I mean, I guess he still got paid for all that stuff. I don't know. Or he got paid for the writing part, probably. Obviously not for the directing part. But still, it's just amazing to me that he's raised, he's raised kids. He has supported a family and hasn't produced, quote unquote, produced any end result for 16 years. So, I mean, it
happens all the time. I know actors and actresses, and you've seen some of them on film, who are first in line for a role. Okay, they want that person, but they go under contract, and it states something along the lines of, if we can attach Cate Blanchett to this, you're out, but you're still getting paid this, this, and this. And I know people who've gotten paid throughout a whole entire project that they never stepped on the set for one moment. They got paid the whole entire time. And I know people who go and do theater and get these paychecks, and I don't know if it's considered a residual check because that's after the fact. But yeah, I know quite a few people who, it's called something. There's an opt-out clause in your contract. Mm-hmm. If we can attach somebody with a bigger name that can draw a bigger crowd or more money to the box office, then you're out. And a lot of times, directors, producers, whoever it may be, have to fight against that being in people's contracts because they want that actor. Mm-hmm. And it could be somebody like Anna Kendrick, who is top tier, but and then there's Cate Blanchett,
Yeah,
if you
that's
will.
a different.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, come on. That's
it's
you can't knock Anna Kendrick, but you also it's not fair to compare her to Cate Blanchett.
not
But
at all. But that's a good comparison with what we're talking about.
yeah,
Like if you want Anna Kendrick, and people fight for those people, and what ends up happening is the director or producer, whoever it may be, ends up being right. And that person ends up winning an Oscar, and they're like, "Told you so." We told you from day one that this is the way we wanted to go. There's infinite amount of stories where that happens.
Well, so the story of this movie, like the plot of this movie, I want to be kind of careful because I had an experience that I rarely have nowadays, especially nowadays. I knew that Todd Field wrote and directed this movie. I knew that Cate Blanchett starred in it. I knew it was about a composer, a female composer, and I didn't watch a trailer. And I walked into that theater and I had no idea what was going to happen. And I'm so glad that I did, because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know, there were no shoes to drop for me. I was just experiencing it in real time as it happened. So it's just, that's essentially like the bare bones. Like, this is about a present day female conductor of a very prestigious orchestra, the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, and she's worked her way up to be at this point in her career. She's got other things that she's created along the way. She's created a kind of like an incubator for female composers, like a grant-based program to help female composers to develop in this space. And so that's, I think, all I would want to say about the movie. Did you have any other like descriptors that you want to say before I get into talking about the movie? But
No, that's pretty good.
okay. I mean, so, and I think that like, just because Todd Field hasn't produced anything in 16 years, when this movie starts, I went through multiple emotions, because do you remember how this movie starts?
I want to say yes, but refresh my memory.
It starts with special thanks the screen. And then I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. Wow, these people must be really important. Special thanks before the movie starts.
Right.
And then the credits go backwards.
No, they don't.
No, they do. Because that's the last thing in the credits.
Historically speaking, that's correct.
But no, what I'm saying is that he puts the credits at the beginning of the movie. Boom. He puts the credits at the beginning of the movie. But the credits at the beginning of the movie go backwards. So you see like, you see like the Teamsters Union logo, and then you see like you keep getting to the point where you're getting into like the dolly grip, and then and the whole time you don't see anything on screen other than the credits. You do hear a female vocal performer singing an aria or something, and you kind of hear Cate Blanchett giving her a little bit of of tutelage and saying like, I kind of want this, kind of want that, and then she just sings for like 5 minutes. It's a 5-minute credit sequence at the beginning of a movie before anything's been shown or anybody knows anything. And like, that takes balls. Like, that is just like, I'm going to assume that you're going to be here at the end of this credit sequence, even though I haven't produced anything in 16 years. And even though, I mean, nobody starts movies like this. Nobody starts movies like this. Nobody does.
Not anymore.
I mean,
that's how. Let me clarify that though.
No, I agree.
I didn't want to sound like I was arguing with you. You are correct. It does go backwards, but this is how it used to be. Credits were at the beginning of the film, not the end.
Sure.
The end was the last thing that you saw.
I get it, but Wizard of Oz, the credit sequence in Wizard of Oz is like a minute and a half long.
Yeah, no doubt, and it's 2022.
There you go.
And there's a whole 50-year of history after Wizard of Oz where it was at the beginning and people were used to that. They did go backwards though, because the actors were the last ones to be shown. So yeah, but I get exactly where you're going with that. I wasn't disputing the fact that is a powerful way to open it. I thought to myself, look how many people have worked on this film. Look how many people's name go unnoticed. Yeah. Because we're gone by this point.
Sure.
Because it's not a Marvel film, so we're not waiting around for the extra credit. Although that would have been clever if he had done something like that, maybe for his next film 20 years from now. But yeah, you're right. It takes big kahunas to do something like that but at the same time, somebody like Todd Field if you know his movies, he's 3 for 3 in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
If you know his movies and you have the patience for his disposition or his tone and attitude towards whatever storytelling he's going, however he tells his story, then you know going into something like this that you're not, you would expect something higher in value and in tone. So, and plus you have Cate Blanchett in the performance of the year. Hyperbole, I understand how I talk sometimes, but it is really something. And she is the trailer. She is what Cate Blanchett, Tar, Todd Field. And nobody else, these working actors in this film. We've seen a couple of them a couple times.
No, we're alone.
She's
oh my gosh, she's so great.
Wonderful. I love everything about her spirit, everything. And when she later on is no longer in the film, I was like, oh, I need her back. Like, I need that balance. But the point to that is that if you're walking into a film like this just for a Saturday night popcorn film, that would be great if that's what your intentions are. There's nobody who's walking into this film that would walk out because of the credits in the beginning of the film.
I would hope not. Yeah.
But it's brave, and you are correct. It is a really sharp, definitive exclamation point beginning.
It's kind of,
really
is. It's kind of like planting his flag and saying that, like,
yeah.
I will be able to hold your interest for the rest of this movie. And I'm going to prove to you that I can back this up. That, like, you're here, you're watching this movie, you're going to sit through 5 minutes of credits, and the rest is, and I know I have something to prove, because that was essentially, like, I went in, like I said, with no expectations, but like after those credits, I was like, my expectations are really high at this point, because, like, ultimately, I don't know if he's trolling us or what by doing this, but I mean, it's pretty, you need to back that up. And I think he did. I mean, I think that this is one of my favorite movies of the year, and it's a challenging movie. It's got a lot of themes and a lot of elements to it and a lot of moving parts that I'm sure we'll get into. But I think the setup of this character and just her, you start off like where she's a vaunted character. She is elevated above everyone else. She's on stage with the whatever New York Times guy or something. I don't know. Who's interviewing her, and there's all these people who are waiting and hanging on every word she says, and she's well respected and honored, and so this is the setup for this character, and so we get to see how the character devolves through the film, and all of the things that happen to her, and what the difference is between that public persona and real life, and it's the reveals that happen in this film are probably my favorite thing about the movie is only giving the audience enough information when they need it, and that it makes you change your view on Tar, on the main character. And he does that like 5 times where he's able to like give you this new piece of information. You're like, oh, okay. I thought I had her figured out, but I don't have her figured out. And then you just keep iterating on that. And then you get to the point where by the end of the movie, like, she's a totally different person than you thought at the beginning, even though she hasn't changed one bit. So it's kind of cool. I really enjoy it.
Well, we've talked for almost 8 years now, and we come up to Oscar season and we start talking about Oscars, and I have a love for that idea, and we've talked about how the Oscar is important to us because it brings us to different films that we might not have seen, challenging films for the movie-going audience that might not have seen, oh, it was Oscar nominated, I'll go see that. That pulls people in. So that said, in the very beginning of this film, when the introduction of her resume, basically, and the interviewer says she's one of 15 people or 18 people, I can't remember, who have won all of the prestigious awards. She's an EGOT. And then they say 4 or 5 of them, all of them are men, with the exception of Cate Blanchett's character, Tar. But there is, uber famous people who are women who have EGOTs, Whoopi Goldberg and Rita Moreno. And I thought it was very interesting that they took those 18 people, condensed it to 5 people as examples that she's in the same pantheon as all of these other people, but yet not one woman was mentioned other than Tar.
They're trying to make a point.
Yeah, I think so. And that keyed me into something immediately. That changed my focus. My hearing changed. I was listening to things differently because I was like, okay, so are we supposed to see this person in a male-dominated role, a male-dominated field, and is that going to influence us later on or anytime soon? And it does, but not, just like you were saying, not any way I was expecting it to. Not any way I was expecting to, which was thrilling. In a way, because I wrote down some adjectives. I didn't write down a whole lot of notes per se. I wrote down adjectives, and one of my last adjectives that I wrote was scary. And not scary in your traditional horror film kind of way, just scary how people lose themselves in themselves, and how talented people and driven people with ambition to get to EGOT status become who they become. And that's a scary scenario. What happens to her and what she does is frightening.
Yeah.
And it just keyed me in immediately. I was like, clever, Todd Field, clever. Because what you've done is you just hooked somebody who is accolade oriented into your vision. And I think you did that on purpose. And if you did, bravo, because it immediately changed my focus into something else. So yeah, I think you're right. It's not what you think it's going to be. And it never is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the next big scene after that, I think, is when she goes and teaches at Juilliard. And at what point, I ask you this every time, at what point did you realize it was a single shot?
I knew you were going to ask me too, not for a split second.
You didn't realize it?
No, hold on.
Okay.
Hold on.
Because I mean, you key in on that stuff too.
Okay. Here's what's so brilliant about me not figuring it out. I felt something different during that whole shot. I was feeling claustrophobic, and I was I'm getting goosebumps thinking about when she turns and walks into the
audience.
Yeah, I was going to say the audience, but the students. It brought me to fear. I was afraid she was going to sit next to me. I was afraid she was going to challenge me. I was afraid she was going to ask me, and I have imposter syndrome. I don't belong in this class. I was feeling all of these things. And when the young man says all the things that he says, I thought, this is more important than just the topical issues that he's talking about. When he's talking about, he's talking from a 2022 disposition and sensibility, and she's talking from a historical perspective, and the debate of whether or not if an artist is not a good human being, can we still love the art
or engage with the art? See, that's the other problem. Is I think there's a difference between like listening to music and then like being the driving force in the performance of that music and making decisions on. So like I think being a conductor and making all those decisions may be a little bit different than passively listening to Bach or whatever. So I think it could be a little bit more complex, but at the same time, like I found myself feeling more like Tar than like that student. But the way that she went in and she essentially commanded that room to the point where like she demanded fear. She demanded like submissiveness.
She got it. And because I would have left, I would have gone, yeah. I would have said, I quit. If she had come at me, I would have shrunk. I know it, because she's so powerful in that scene. And then after the scene was over, I was like, I remember thinking for a split second, stay focused, Paul, because something just happened to you and I'm not sure what it was. And I don't like the feeling, and I'm not happy with where I'm at with this film, meaning I'm not happy with the emotional insecurities I was having. And then I just happened to go down a rabbit hole on YouTube about one shots in films, and that was the first one.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, that's it. That's why I felt like that the whole entire time. And I remember thinking to myself, well, that was odd how the camera moved and she was right there and then spun around and then she was there and then he was there and he was there. I was like, something is amiss here. What is it? But it never once dawned on me to think it's one shot.
Well, see, that's great. That's great because it's organic and it's something that's not forced. And so I think that that's the big thing. The exact moment you talked about when you started feeling nervous, I think that you could, I mean, it's a theory, but I think it's probably pretty well, played out, is that when the moment I realized that this was going to be a single shot was that it spent most of its time up on the stage, and then she walks down and it kind of pans over. And then as she's walking down, the camera moves forward in an unnatural way, because up until that point, the camera could have almost even been on sticks, could have been on a tripod. And it could have even been on, a dolly. You could have been something that rolls on the stage. But then at the exact moment that she walks down and the camera actually moves down parallel to her, that's an unnatural camera movement for what we have felt so far in this scene. And so you realize that, like, okay, this is different. And then it starts following her. It starts moving up and down the stairs in the audience. And she walks in front of it. She walks away from it. It does some zooming. It doesn't do a lot of zooming, but like a zoom is unnatural. And then that kind of like sideways and vertical motion at the same time is also unnatural. So that, I think, is an element to making, like, it's a technical element that's adding into the narrative elements that are making you feel what you're feeling. And so you're right. I felt, nervous. And the other thing that I felt at that moment when I was watching that scene was that, like, this kid that's acting opposite Cate Blanchett, who's like, patting his foot and stuff, like, I don't know how much of that was necessarily acting. Like, could you imagine how nervous you would potentially be? Like, well, first of all, I couldn't do it because I'm not an actor, but like, I'm sure the actor was like, this is a huge opportunity and he wanted to do a good job. And I think he did. He looked nervous and he looked out of it, and he was able to like get out his lines just barely. But I also was feeling for the actor himself, because I was just like, I don't know how he's getting through all of this. And he's a prominent part of this movie and of the establishing, one of the establishing pieces of this character, because we've seen when the cameras are on and when the cameras are off, and those two kind of go together. And I mean, spoilers separate from that, but we've seen her in kind of like a private setting, and then her in a mentor setting. And I think that people learn differently. And so some people would have probably been much more receptive to the way that she was teaching, but that kid obviously wasn't. He was done. Yeah.
I don't think he was objecting to her teaching method. I think he was trying to get her to understand that his feet are solid in the ground about this guy being a
bad person.
Bad person. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fill in the blanks. That counts to him as much as what the music does to him. And that, because of the influence of his behavior or his lack of character, meaning the composer, that he couldn't listen to him objectively because he was taking all that in. And that's a valid thing. And as for being nervous, that probably added to it. But I also think that his hardest job was to stand his ground. And he did. And he had to during that whole rehearsed around him sequence, because that all is around him. It all happens around. He only moves one time.
And it's one take. So if he messes up, you got to start at one.
Or anybody messes up.
Well, but it's mainly her and him. So, like, they're the only ones that really have lines. Well, and the ones that have lines too. So, yeah.
And I think you're exactly right. It is the setup for the rest of the movie. It is the quintessential scene that happens that actually allows you, and if you know the ending of the movie, you can put it together,
Yeah.
and subconsciously you put it together right then and there. We should have known where her character was going by that scene. He told us everything we needed to know in that scene, every single thing of who she was, where she came from. And it was that person in power finding rationalizations and justifications for being or saying that this composer was a bad person, but which is also a justification and rationalization for everything that she does and everything she's done in her life that does not pan out well for her at the end, as well it should not. So it is the scene. And I was glad I didn't realize it was a one shot, because it would have taken my emotional being out of it. And I would have been technically, like, the moment I realized Birdman was one shot, I was like, oh, how are they going to do that? Okay, I think there's a cut there. And then, like, it takes me out of it. And then the second or third time I watch it, it's fun because I now know to look for it and I'm not emotionally connected to it. So, and the other thing it does is it puts you squarely on one of their sides. You either take his side or her side. Yes.
Well, I think there's a way to be objective, and there's a way to say, like, these are characters, but I don't think you have to be completely all in on one side. But you're right. That's those scenes, the public and the private scenes, they inform the character, and that's within the first 15 minutes of the movie, and it's a long movie. So I mean, you kind of get the bedrock right there, and then as things progress, her character gets more complex and more complex, and I mean, until there's reveals close to 15 minutes to the end of the movie that are huge reveals that you're just like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know.
I will want to state one more thing, and then we'll move on past the one shot. If and when Todd Field gets his Oscar nomination for Best Director, it will be because he's that inventive. That it wasn't shticky, it wasn't gimmicky, it wasn't just to do it. It was purposeful, and he informed the movie's right there in that 10 minutes. It's right there, and that's really hard to do. And I think he'll probably get a screenwriting credit or a nomination, and I think finally he'll get a Best Director, and it will be because of that scene. Well, people will remember his technique as a director because of that scene. We can move on.
And I think because of things that happen later on in the movie, we're being very vague, but because of things that happen later on in the movie, that scene wouldn't work as well if it was not one scene. Because as the audience, we know exactly what happened in that room at that time. So, I mean, that informs later scenes. So it's hard to be vague, but I want people to watch the movie, but it's kind of like, is it still in theaters? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's still in theaters.
Okay,
I just went the other day to Banshees of
Inisherin.
Yes, I saw that, and Tar was still there.
Okay, good, because I totally missed Triangle of Sadness. Like, that just came and went in a week. I was like, oh man, I was excited to see that.
Well, there was an actual big poster of Cate Blanchett, the one where she's composing.
It's underneath her.
Yeah, I love that picture.
Oh, wow.
And a kind of a review, and I kind of went like this as I was walking by. I was like, I'm kind of done with you right now. I need something else right now. I can't do you right now.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it, but it has definitely stayed top of mind for me. And I've seen other movies since then. But it's still right up there. I mean, it's like I said, one of my favorite. This and Everything Everywhere All at Once and Top Gun Maverick actually are kind of like my favorites at this point. But
that about sums you up perfectly.
Oh geez.
The triangle of those films.
Yeah, I guess maybe.
You might want to wait about 5 or 6 minutes into the podcast before you say something like Tar is one of my favorite movies, because if I didn't know you and you said that and I'd seen the movie, I'd been like,
it's
okay.
I'm a good person, really. I didn't say Tar was my favorite character.
I want to be just like her when I grow up.
I agree with everything she says and everything she does.
I aspire to be her.
So, but yeah, I mean, the moving forward into the movie, we meet her wife, and we find out actually in that scene that she's gay, and we meet her wife, and then we kind of start to understand the people in her life, her assistant, her wife, and then we get a little bit of a sprinkling of this character, the oh, what's the character, Krista Taylor character, and so all of those characters kind of intertwine and intermingle, and I do think that I think that and I definitely want to get your opinion on this too, but movies that place themselves in a position for Oscars, it seems like uh, movies that may want to take a fast lane to an Oscar nomination may try to play with current more current social events or current social elements, and I think that this movie doesn't do that. I think this movie has a gay character, and this movie has a female character in an industry that is not known for having females in as prominent in prominent positions, in that being conductors of orchestras or of symphonies. So, but I think that without those elements, this character wouldn't work. Like there's elements, the fact that she is a female conductor and that she creates a female based or a female only conducting grant and conducting program, like that has a lot to do with the things that she is ultimately accused of, and the things that we find out that she's definitely been doing, which is she's been kind of focusing in on this group of people and trying to take advantage of people, trying to take advantage of her power over people, and her ability to give people opportunities, and because she's a woman and they're women and she is attracted to women, that is all built into the story. And I think that without all of those elements, like this story wouldn't work, this character wouldn't work. And so I think that I don't think that this is a gimmick to have her be gay in this film. So I don't know, what is that, anything that like crossed your mind? Or
Yes, but not necessarily in that fashion. I thought to myself, this movie seemed like it was written for a man at first, but we've seen this story many, many times.
It could also very well be an allegory for Harvey Weinstein, or, I mean, the movie industry in general.
Absolutely.
But you take it, you remove it one, and then it makes it not palatable. It's not palatable, but it gives it a sense of like a third party observation, instead of like a, whatever the She Said movie that's out right now, where it's like,
right,
we're going to tell exactly what happened and exactly the way that happened, and we're going to like dig in, and we're going to just like shove your face in it. And this is like we're going to do this thing over here, but guess what? It can be applied to all of these other industries, movies included.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I have twisted and turned it in my head over and over again, whether or not it's significant or it's just who she is. And could this film work if she was a female director who was heterosexual and married to a man? Yes, it could. But for some reason, I don't know, I'm trying to choose my words correctly here, because not that I'm afraid of stepping on toes or anything, but I'm curious why it went that way, because it's power over women.
No, I think it has nothing to do with, I think it's from a pragmatic standpoint. It's like she is someone who's in an industry. She's unique in the industry. She is prominent in the industry. Nobody else is like her, because she is the prominent female conductor. She is ostensibly trying to open up this field to more female conductors. Okay, this is the cameras are on version of Tar. I'm trying to get more people to, I'm trying to get more women, give more women opportunities to be what I am, or to get to reach the heights that I've reached. And the industry is against them. The industry was against me. I fought against it, and now I'm on top. Now I'm going to give them a path to move forward and to come, to get to my height of fame and to my height of opportunity. But ultimately, what she is doing, at least for some of the people in this program, is that she is using the program to kind of like pick people out and say, like, I can help you even more, but quid pro quo, you give me a little bit, I give you a little bit, and we, that thing. But it wouldn't work if it was a male conductor trying to get females in, because it's not as altruistic. Like, she seems completely altruistic. She's like, just trying to help out other women here, man, just trying to, and she's kind of building this funnel of women. And we see the different, iterations of that. We see the Krista, we see the Noemi Merlin character, and then we see Olga, the cellist. So we start seeing, each of the different stages of her, whatever you want to call it, grooming, or, or just essentially like taking advantage of her position of power and her ability to completely change other people's lives. And all she's asking is for a little bit of companionship, let's say, and that's the kind of like catch. And so I don't think it would work. I mean, I guess it would work if it was like you could work opposite if it was a, female driven industry, and then a man gets in it and gets really successful. And then, although male female dynamics, that doesn't happen very often. I don't even know what industry that would be, but I think that like it has to be in this order, in this configuration, for it to really work. So I'm trying to think of parallels that don't include like sexual favors, but I mean, I don't know. It seems to be what a lot of people like. So I don't know.
Well, I don't know if it could work if she was heterosexual, because even though it's still grooming and still a person in power taking advantage of somebody not in power, I'm wondering if society would see it like that if an older woman was grooming a younger guy.
But the younger guy doesn't need a leg up. There's a bajillion conductors that are men. Like, that's the kind of catch.
You got a point. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. It's just interesting to me that we have this complex character, and at her base, at her core, power corrupts absolutely. And she did not. And by the way, I want to say this. I've been thinking about the thought of power corrupts absolutely. That to me sounds like, if you say it in the wrong sentence, as if I'm justifying anything that she's done. Like her power overwhelmed her and she didn't know what she was doing. No, I'm not saying that at all. Her behavior is...
She's on the hook for everything she's done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And should be 100%. Whenever I've been thinking about this and I wanted, when I thought about talking to you about it, I thought we're going to be very careful, because I don't want to justify or rationalize or make it, oh, well, she's had it hard because she's a woman. That's why she's doing. None of that is true. Not for how I saw the character. Mm-hmm. It's despicable what she does. That said, I think you're right. I think that in this film, in this industry, in this world, it has to be a woman. It has to be a gay woman. I agree with all that. I just am ultimately, and we could talk about this later on, a little depressed, if you will, or deflated that once again, somebody who has the chance to take this industry and move it somewhere else and uplift people and move them somewhere else relies on their base instinct of what their needs are. And it always comes back to that when it comes to people with uber amounts of talent and getting into a position. They never can control themselves. And maybe this is some kind of twisted thing in my brain, that women are better than men, and maybe women shouldn't fall into this category and women shouldn't abuse their power. Maybe it's something in me, and it's a life lesson to see a character who is acting exactly like those characters act, but doesn't look like or fills in the same shoes as those characters traditionally. So that's perplexing on its own. It's so complex that my brain shuts down when I start thinking about it, because I get so in it and start thinking about it. And I'm like, what am I supposed to feel? What am I supposed to do? Click, done. Click.
Well, and the other thing that makes it even more complicated is that her daughter, she has a daughter with her wife. The daughter's name's Petra. And it seems like she really loves her daughter. And it seems like she has a connection with her daughter. And so it's that makes it even more complex. It's like, this is a horrible person. And then it's like, she should just be horrible to her daughter, like that would be so much easier, but it's not. It's just this extra piece into this. And she comes to the aid of her daughter, and she, in a very,
I love that scene though.
Intense way.
I love that scene. I love scenes like that.
She goes and confronts her daughter's bully and just like gives her, tells her what's what, and says, this is what's going to happen.
I can neither confirm nor deny I would want to do the exact same thing in the exact same manner. But let me ask you this. And the important part for me about the daughter is bonded to her differently than she is to the other mother. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not on a deeper level or a more intense level, just different. They have a different communication, as well parents do with their children. Sure. Fathers and mothers have different communications, mothers and mothers, blah, blah, blah. But why do you think Todd Field decided to give her that side of her character? Because it really does humanize her. Mm-hmm. Yes, in the midst of bonding with the daughter and taking her to school and having a great day and having hot chocolate, she goes over and, takes care of the bully in the fashion you're not yet expecting to see from the character, because you don't fully know where this is going with this character. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much indicated where it's going, and she's pretty intense. But why do you think he added in the type of relationship that the mother and daughter have in this film? Was it to humanize her? Was it to give her like a good quality? What was it?
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly it. It is to make her a fully rounded character, as opposed to like the bad guy. I mean, she's not the whatever, Cobra Commander and G.I. Joe. She's not. She actually has
Tar.
She has a more complex life. I mean, everyone has a more complex life. So like, I think that does make her more relatable, and it makes her more like, because you could see each of those scenes, and you could be like, well, like you said, I would totally do that, or this reminds me of this, or it's, and that's, I think, one reason why this film is so long is that those would be the first scenes to get cut. That would be the first character to get cut. I think you need to have each of the women in her life to see the progression of her predatory nature, because you've got her wife is the first violin of the orchestra that she's conducting, and then her assistant is next in line, and then Krista is the one that didn't fall in that didn't stay in lockstep and kind of bucked against her, and she just dropped her, and that was too much. And then so this Olga cellist is the very beginnings. So essentially, by having those, four characters, three other characters, you're seeing her whole playbook, but just in a condensed manner in three different people. So exactly how she's gone about this, because she's been doing it for however long. So I think that's another effective way of doing it. But it's so much easier if we can just say like, this is a horrible person. But then once we see her tuck in her daughter, and then she has to rub her daughter's foot for her daughter to go to, that's such a specific thing. That's a writer's thing that is just, it's so specific. And so it's maybe he does that for his daughter. I have no idea, but it's so specific, and it's so lived in that it makes everything that much more. It's like in, you know, in like video games where, or even movies, like there's like the difference between like crappy movies with crappy CGI in movies where it's like somebody's wearing a you know, armor, like a whole like suit of armor, and then it's like super shiny, and then it looks perfect. And then, you know, obviously like movies that have a lot more money, they'll go in and they'll like take the armor and they'll have like cuts in it, and they'll have like dirt on it, and they'll just have like discolorations on it. It just looks more lived in, and that's, the character's more lived in with you know, her interactions with her daughter. And so I think that's why he did it.
While you were talking, I just discovered for me why the daughter's in the film. Yes, I agree with everything you said. Well-rounded. Specifically, the wife says to her, she's asking for the foot rub. Mm-hmm. So you know that this is a thing only Tar can do.
Yeah.
And it establishes, I don't necessarily think it shows a well-rounded character, meaning we need to see another side to the character she presents later on, or that we discover later on. I'm now thinking she's that character in spite of having a loving relationship with her daughter. That relationship's at stake if she doesn't do the right thing. And she doesn't do the right thing, and that relationship becomes pretty much 86th.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's why the daughter's there for me. The daughter is to show us that even though she has all of this stuff that are way more valuable than an Oscar, an Emmy, a girlfriend, a fling, whatever it is, way more valuable. She has the unconditional love of a kid, a child who needs her specifically for soothing her to go to bed. That's a big deal. Yeah, I mean, having your kid go to sleep is a big deal. Mm-hmm. You know, certain parents can get certain children in their family to eat certain things. Other parents can't. Other parents can't even get Johnny's socks off before he takes a bath, but the dad comes home and Johnny takes his socks off. It's just the way it works. And that's a special bond. And she has that with, and it's at its purest form in that relationship. And she still decides, so it's on some level to,
it's stakes. That's what you're saying. It's the stakes of the movie is her daughter. So yeah, you gotta have her. So yeah, that's true. So all right, I think we should probably get into spoilers. I mean,
sure,
we're probably there. So I think that's what I was trying to say earlier, is that, you know, if that first scene, the first Juilliard scene, wasn't a one shot, once we see it all chopped up and edited into that viral video, we wouldn't have had the context for that. It would have meant a little less, I think. But it's not even like, oh, we had 5 different setups during this, and it didn't seem like there was any time that was missed during that conversation. We saw the whole conversation, soup to nuts, top to bottom. We know exactly what was said, when, we know where everybody was, and then you see it chopped up like that, and you're just like, so I can see how, first of all, the thing that got me was that when she goes into that meeting with the board, the Berlin Philharmonic board, and they're like, somebody recorded it, they edited it, you know, even though they weren't supposed to have their phones. And like, that was the one thing that Tar was so just annoyed at. She was like, why, how could they have their phones? They're not supposed to have their phones. Like, it's this whole, like, they're supposed to be following the rules. And it's like, well, you're not following the rules. You're on your own thing. Like, you feel like you're above the rules. Like, you are completely separate from all of this, and you just assume that everybody else is going to fall in line. And so, yeah. And seeing that, and seeing how it was edited, which it was edited in a very choppy manner, and it made her say things she didn't actually say, even though the things that she said, like you pointed out, you know, were, you know, they were insensitive. They weren't, you know, trying to meet the student where he was. They were rude, whatever, but they tried to essentially, like, you know, take her down by modifying the things that she said to make them even worse. And so I thought that was interesting. It was a little kind of like, you know, peek into the the ability of social media to enact change. And so that makes it even more complex. It's like she's doing all this stuff, and this is the thing that kind of kicks off that, and the Krista Taylor suicide kicks off all of the, all of her chickens are coming home to roost, and she's been able to push things aside, but it's all happening at the same time, and she's not able to handle it. She's not able to effectively use all of her tools to just brush it off. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny because I was trying not to use certain things in this podcast, certain phrases
Idioms.
in this pod. Yes. And the chickens always come home to roost was one I was trying to avoid, but it's totally appropriate. You know what that scene did for me when she goes into that board meeting or boardroom and into that meeting? It wasn't until that moment that I had fully accepted that she really is a bad person and she's made bad choices. And okay, she's made bad choices that have developed her character in a way that I would never aspire to be that. So if you want to call her a bad person, call her a bad person. If you want to say she's just challenged because
she's done bad things.
She's done bad things.
Yeah.
But I was not fully focused on that until that meeting because of her response. My thought when I was watching it was anybody who's innocent will be defensive towards an accusation like that. But the defensive quality is different when you have truth on your side, when you know that that was edited, when you know, which it was. And because of the way Todd Field wrote that scene, it made me see her clearly, instantaneously for who she was, because we know it was edited to make it look like that. Why is she so overly defensive about it? That was clearly edited. That's clear. Okay. Well, if it was, and you're telling the truth, I have never seen somebody who has been factually found out as telling the truth who reacts that way. Only people, in my experience, that, because I've worked with human resources, I've worked with social services, and I've seen people in and I watch a lot of People's Court. I see people trying to tell the truth, and when they become that level of defensive, you immediately, there's a spidey sense that goes off. They're not telling the truth, or something's amiss here. Something's not right. And it wasn't until that point in the film that I actually went, oh, she's actually doing all of this. Like, I knew it wasn't good that she wanted the emails to be erased and that any evidence of this person was supposed to be erased. And I'm still perplexed by characters in films and in real life that expect emails to disappear. Why did you put it in an email to begin with?
Also, if you delete the email that goes to you, Krista Taylor still has the emails in her email account.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
You're not the FBI, so it's gonna be there. So, well, speaking of People's Court, strange I'm making two references so close together and about People's Court. She always says, Judge Millian always says, say it, forget it, write it, regret it. And that is the truth. If you write something down, why would you write? And she wrote down exactly what she did. She took this talent of this young lady and basically said, well, you really don't have it here. You don't really have it here. You don't really have it here. I'm glad we kind of had a thing, but that was separate. But your talent really isn't what it was supposed to be. But the 20 emails that came before that were, you're so talented. You did great on this, your movement, this, blah, 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 your sound on this pitch, whatever the musical terms are that they're using. So it's proof that happened. And it's just mind-boggling to me that people still think they can tell 3 people to get rid of emails and expect them to
go away.
Let's shred them.
Yeah, not going to work.
Yeah, not going to work. It's bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so at this point, like, things are getting real bad. and she ends up still taking Olga to New York, I guess, somehow, like the cellist, like as her assistant or whatever, because her previous assistant left. Like, and I don't know, it's hard for me. That's the one character where I don't know if she's like in on it, if the Olga character is kind of like in on the whole ruse. Because do you remember the first piece of video or the first image that is shown in the movie? It's a cell phone camera with with a live video stream, and it's we find out close to the end that it's Olga on the private plane with Cate Blanchett, with Tar, and she's saying like our girl or our woman is super tired or something like that. Now
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know if
yeah. I
she's
remember.
streaming that to a bunch of people, or if she's like doing a like a FaceTime type thing, and she's, you know, texting somebody. I don't know if she's texting the Noemi Merlon character, like if they're in on some sort of a plot together or what, but it's just I don't know. It that is an interesting way to start the movie. I don't know why he did it that way, but because, especially since that's far in the future in the timeline of the movie that we are, of this character that we're privy to. So it seems, I don't know, it seems out of place, but it can't be because he's too good.
Yeah, I thought that was the assistant.
I thought it was too, until I don't think that we don't see her on a plane. Now maybe that's another instance of her taking the same plane back and forth to New York. It probably is.
I thought it was the assistant and the girlfriend who commits suicide.
Yeah, could be. But we know the only time we see the Krista Taylor character is in Tar's head, in these like kind of flashbacks just of their kind of intimate moments, and it's very obscured and slow-mo and fans blowing her red hair everywhere. Like that's the only instances we see of her. We don't see, you know, we don't get flashbacks of her actually conducting anything. We don't get any flashbacks of any conversations or anything like that. So it's just kind of this specter of this character.
Okay, it's too much to think about. So let's dwindle it down to one question.
Yeah.
Is Olga aware of what she's getting involved in? And I think the answer is yes.
Me too.
And I think she's 20 years advanced thought process wise, reality wise, societally wise, woke, for lack of a better term, which I think is a positive term, not a negative. So I'm not criticizing, I'm labeling, because Olga, I think, is going to become Tar without all the trappings that happen. Because Olga's up front. Although she does lie to her and say, I'm jet lag, I'm going to sleep. And then you see her sneaking out later on.
Yeah.
So that gives you the impression that she knows why she's being brought on this trip.
But she got a free private plane flight to New York City.
Which is exactly what Tar would have done 20 years ago in order to meet that guy who was the composer of the whatever that wrote the blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's perplexing, because is Olga going to end up in the same position as Tar?
Well, if you say that absolute power corrupts absolutely, then yes.
Here's the caveat to that, though. True, deep embedded talent doesn't need power to prove it has talent, or they have talent. And Olga has talent. I'm not saying Tar doesn't. I'm saying that Olga is secure in her talent. She knows where her talent lies. She doesn't care about that blind audition. She doesn't care that she saw Tar in the bathroom and was flirting with her, or Tar was flirting, whatever you want to call that scene. It's odd. And meaning there's subtext going on there.
Yeah.
And you find out later on that the way you felt is exactly how that plays out. Do I think Olga knows that she can see her blue suede shoes? No. Do I think that she cares? No. Do I think Olga thinks she's the best player at that point in time? Yes, I do. So she's not surprised that she's taking first chair from having to ask somebody permission, and that whole manipulation that Tar does is amazing, because she does that thing that manipulators do where she tries to make it sound like it's your idea.
Yeah, she's like backing the car in to the driveway. She's not like just shoving it right into the driveway. She's like kind of like, well, we'll get there. We're gonna kind of go a little different way. But
so if you think we do this, then maybe we should do that. What do you think? Well, I think that no, but what do you think? And she never allows the person to answer. But that first chair, that actress, she did her job for the day, because that scene, she says barely nothing.
She's also preying on the fact that everyone I mean, this is Tar. If Tar wants this cellist to be the featured performer on this particular piece, then who is this person to say that Lydia Tar is wrong?
All right, so we spent an hour or so talking about this film, and we barely scratched the surface of things. We've delved into some really deep things, and we've talked about some of the most important things that happened to us while we were watching the film, and important things that happened during the film. But there's so many things going on in this film. There are two in particular that I just need a real quick take on. We don't have to go into large descriptions or another hour's worth of a podcast. We can do a revisit a year from now, because I'm going to have to find a reason to watch the movie again, because I don't know if I can be in this world again. I just don't know if I can be. I don't want in her life anymore. So here's the question. Remember the scenes in the beginning of the film when she's hearing noises from the car and she's hearing sounds from the refrigerator, and you're thinking to yourself later on in the film, oh, she's that musician who hears music and everything. Oh, and I love the speech that her mentor gives her about how you could judge a person's intelligence by their sensitivity to noise. Mm-hmm. I must be the smartest person. I must be the most intelligent person in the world, because noise is, I have a hypersensitivity to some things. People say I have bionic hearing, because I'd be like, do you hear that? And they'd be like, no, not till you just pointed that out. Now I can't get it out of my head. I said, I've been hearing it for 10 minutes. So later on, so this is twofold. So later on, when she's going to Olga's apartment, and she slips and she falls, and then she makes an excuse later on to the class, you should see the other guy, which is such a cliche, but it could be only that. You know now that she's a manipulator and a liar, and she takes the truth and she bends it to her needs. We're on the same page with the character. I thought, like when she's hearing the lady scream in the park and she's hearing the noises, I thought it was her subconscious bothering her that she's done these bad things in real life, and that her inside voice won't allow her to settle. Or was it simply the music is influenced by it?
I think so. I think that, first of all, she is paid to hear things that nobody else hears. She listens to an orchestra play pieces of music that have been played thousands and thousands and thousands of times, and it's being played by the highest of the high professional musicians, and the upper echelon of these musicians. And she's paid to go in there and be like, you didn't do that just right. Like, she has to, like, she's getting down to like needle in a haystack type analysis of these pieces of music. And so that's her specialty. But I think at the same time, she is plagued by all of these decisions. And mentally, I'm sure she's going through stuff. She's plagued by all these decisions. And so she may think that she hears something, or she may hear something and then it gets morphed into something like a woman screaming really far away while she's running, or what is it? The like beeping or whatever. What was going on in her apartment? There was like some sort of like
fan from the refrigerator or something.
And she couldn't hear like exactly. She couldn't echolocate it, figure out where it was coming from. But those are the things that are just kind of like menacing her in that way. And I think that it can be both, in that she's trying to in her day job, she tries to isolate and analyze the smallest and the most minute of details to make this performance perfection, or her version of perfection. And when she's not listening to that, when she's not focused on that, when she's not living that exact part of her, then she's got all the other stuff that she's done and all the other stuff that she's dealing with in her brain and in her head. And that, you know, those things can be, like I said, kind of like menacing her. I think it's a good way of being vague, but then also understanding that it's utilizing her hearing. If it was something where she like kind of looked over and she thought she saw somebody pass behind the door, or, you know, that's a little bit different. It's vision, or, you know, or she always smelled a particular perfume. Like, it's different. That smell, like it's the fact that Todd Field used hearing for this to manifest this dread for her. I think it was smart, and really the only way he could have done it. To kind of like give you that feeling of like she knows something's not right, and it's just popping up in different ways throughout the film.
Okay. So once again, that's a whole nother podcast, and the subject I'm getting ready to bring up is probably a whole nother podcast, but I need to touch base with you about it because I think I understand. I know what I felt, but I'm still perplexed by it. The next door neighbor and taking care of the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And then that just gets, the ante just keeps going up and up and up to the point where you're dealing with a dying woman who has defecated all over herself. Why is that in the film? Is that a representation of how she treats people? Is that a representation of true love that she'll never feel? Is that a representation of giving true love that she'll never be able to? What is that?
I think that it's a couple things. The big thing that I got from it is that she's confronted with a person in which her power doesn't work on. That person, like the people showing up, they're like, who are you again? Like, it's just, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's like if Brad Pitt came to your door, you'd be like, hey, it's Brad Pitt. But if Brad Pitt came to the door of some random person who's never seen a movie, then they'd be like, how are you doing? What are you doing here? Like, it's a totally different thing. So there's that. And then there's also, she's being confronted with death, obviously, which I think most people aren't really too excited about. And she's trying to like separate herself. Did you notice how like when she did actually like kind of go over there and kind of like have to help out a little bit, she immediately ran over there and like ripped off her clothes and started scrubbing herself. So I don't know. I don't think that, I don't know. I don't know what that was. It's like, I want to get that death off of me. I'm not really sure how we're supposed to see that as an audience. That's one take, is like, there's death over there. I want to get as far away from that as possible. And I don't want to think about death because death is horrible. And like, that's like the worst thing, because also in death, all of your power goes away too. Like, everybody's equal when they're dead. You know, there's no like famous people and not famous people. There's no like amazing composers and crappy composers. It's the great equalizer. So I think it was a couple things there for that. But
yeah. The whole idea of that it represented somebody she didn't have power over. That's of course what that is.
Yeah.
And that is brilliant. Like that is such a profound way to get that point across. That is like, how does one person's brain think of that? That's a whole nother podcast, but
he's obviously dealt with people who have extreme power. So he's trying to say stuff to us. He's essentially screaming it at us.
Yeah.
But
well, I have an early morning tomorrow, and I'm probably going to get half the sleep that I thought I was going to, because that is going to keep me up thinking about.
I think that we need to talk about two more things. Number one, the scene where she goes home, and I think she lives in Jersey, not New York City. And she goes into her house, and then there's two things in there. She's looking in her room. It's a little bit cliche, but it needs to happen. Looking in her room, she's going through her tapes and all that stuff, and then you see something on her wall. I don't know what it was, like a soccer certificate or something, or maybe it was a music certificate, but it said Linda Tarr. And then her brother shows up, and he's like, Linda, oh, I'm sorry, I mean Lydia. And it's Tar without an accent on it, grave or whatever it is. So that tells you a lot. That's such a character moment. It's such a big and deep character moment that she's, number one, running away from her history. She didn't think, especially early on, she didn't think that she was worthy of being a great composer. She had to change things about herself. She had to embrace what she thought was, class, and what she thought was this gravitas, and like what she thought was something that sounded like a person that could be a great composer. And by doing that, she felt like she had to change her name and make herself, it's a facade that she put on. And so you can tell that for a very long time she's been struggling with her identity. And so that right there is kind of amazing. And then the last scene, I guess, which get right back on the horse. She can't stop. Like, she can't, that's all she knows. She's so far down this career path that she's going to take a job conducting anybody anywhere, because that's all that she gets. That's what she gets her worth from, not from her kid. I don't know. Is that what it's supposed to? Is it, maybe she can't see her kid? I don't know. I can't remember how that shakes out, but.
Well, like I said, I've been trying to avoid every cliche that's come up since I've been thinking about this film, and be careful what you wish for keeps reoccurring in my brain every time I think about the ending of the film. You want to be a conductor, you want to be in front of an audience, you want to feel the music. She takes it. You have no idea what she's conducting when she goes there.
No, you do. It's a thing. It's a real.
Right. No.
Oh.
Until you actually see, you think it's just
so
another
good.
job, not necessarily
so
a job in Arizona or wherever, a job in another country that is not first world New York. It's not Paris. It's not Germany. It's not any of those places, which they do a hierarchy and talk about that in the film, about where she really wanted to end up. And she wanted to end up in as the German composer or German conductor. Yes. Thank you. So be careful what you wish for. And in a way, it shows that she has integrity as an artist, and I'm finger quoting a lot, but because she still has to do it no matter what. This is what she's possessed to do, and this is all she knows to do. So she's going to do it at any level that she can do it. But I think that if Todd Field was in my screening, he might want to talk to me afterwards, because I laughed so loud and so hard when it was revealed what she was doing. I embarrassed myself, because I even felt twisted and like, why did I laugh? So I felt like it was almost, once again, going back to the 5-year-old analogy, where somebody gets their due and you're like, haha, I knew you're going to fall in the mud because you're a jerk, and haha, you got your lunch fell out of your lunch pail, haha. And you don't want to be that person that's like, ha, I'm glad you got what your due is. But that was my reaction. Yeah. My reaction was, haha. And then I was like, oh,
well, I
wonder what Todd Field would think. Like,
well, that's Schadenfreude. That's like feeling good about other people feeling bad.
It's terrible.
That's a thing. That's definitely.
It's called what?
Schadenfreude. That's it's some German word, I guess. But that's
a new thing.
That's if you derive pleasure from other people's pain. So
Okay, well, I wouldn't exactly say it was that. I wouldn't say it was like I was pleasured by the fact that she was now in pain, but I was.
Well,
karma is something I definitely believe in, and so
yeah. Well, no, I understand that. And you're right. I mean, but the crazy part is there's a couple of things that I got from that. Number one, the way that Todd Field, like you said, the way that he reveals it, it is like she goes through the same process. She finds a place, she goes through the score, she's marking up the score, she's, eating and drinking coffee or whatever. And she's obviously in a different country. Turns out she's in Thailand or something like that. And so, she's going through her process. And then you're like, oh my gosh, that's the first thing I thought was like, she is actually bouncing back already. Like somehow
she's working.
Yeah. Somebody hired her to do that with all the other stuff going on. Somebody hired her. Like she's still getting jobs. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that once it's revealed that she's conducting a youth orchestra and they're playing, that is a score from a video game, from Monster Hunter. So that I think would be anybody who's like super into, classical music and like, she was at the heights of that and she literally goes from a New Yorker interview to conducting a video game score.
I'm seriously trying not to have a reaction to it right now. I'm seriously trying not to do your Das Boot Achtung Baby thing. What did you call it? What is it called?
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude?
Yeah.
I've never heard that a day in my life. But I'm trying not to do that right now because I get this silly, maybe I do have that. Okay, I'm not going to react.
The other scary part about all of this is that, and I kind of said it at the beginning of the podcast, is that she starts up here, she ends up down here, but I don't know if she's actually changed. And that's also the scary part. So, man, it's a complex character. And I did get a lot of the movie. It's so well done. The craft is so well done. We didn't talk about the score. The score is very well done. It's Hildur Guðnadóttir, who won for Joker a few years ago. So female composer. So she's awesome. And so the cinematography was great. And it makes me want to. It was Florian Hofmeister, and it makes me want to watch. He just did a show, Pachinko, which I've heard about. That's on like Apple Plus. It's got the grandma from Minari in it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've seen trailer.
I've heard it's really good. And I mean, it looks beautiful too. And I'm like, oh dang. I mean, if the guy who shot Tar shot Pachinko, then I think he shot the whole thing. It was a cinematographer on the whole thing. So that makes me more excited to see it. So I think Todd Field surrounded himself with people at the top of their game, and it was, I thought it was an awesome movie. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the award season. So yeah.
Well, we're definitely going to have to do a revisit because there's too many things to talk about because my mind is completely blown on so many different levels right now. I'm challenging who I thought I was as a human being at the end of this podcast because why did I laugh like that? Like, what is that all about? I'm not going to condemn myself. I'm just going to try to understand. But I will say this, and to lighten it up a little bit, statistically speaking, something very interesting will happen if Cate Blanchett is nominated for the Oscar. That will be 3 films that one director has directed that there have been acting nominations from all 3 of his films. In the Bedroom was Tom Wilkinson, Sissy Spacek, who came this close to winning it, and Marissa Tomei for her second Oscar nomination. A long time between My Cousin Vinny and then Little Children, Jackie Earle Haley and Kate Winslet both were nominated, and Jackie Earle Haley came this close to winning it also. And it looks like Cate Blanchett will be the front runner, and it will be a major shock if she's not nominated because the power behind her commitment and her intensity is unmatched this year. Whether or not people will vote for her because that character is not, in the end, somebody you want to aspire to or be around or even like. But then again, power between somebody like you and I and power between people in Hollywood might be perceived as something completely different. They might be like, yeah, we love her. We're putting her on a t-shirt. But if and when she does receive a nomination, I don't, and now he's only made 3 films. So statistically it might've been easier for this to happen, but I can't think of another director who every film that he's directed, albeit 3, these powerhouse performances and nominations that come this close to winning. And as far as I'm concerned, Cate Blanchett is locked and loaded. You never know, because look at Coda last year. Who knew? Yeah. We sort of talked about it, but nobody knew that was going to happen for real. And so we'll never know until we're right there. But she's the front runner.
Yeah. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer. And we're on YouTube. You can see our beautiful faces on youtube.com and just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast. And we'll see you next time.